Her horse returned without her, carrying a love letter that told the truth of her heart. The buckskin mare burst through the twilight dust of Red Butte, hooves drumming against the hard-packed street like the beat of war drums. Men spilled from the saloon, startled by the sudden apparition of a riderless animal streaked with sweat and fear. Reins dangled, saddle empty, eyes rolling white in panic. Elias Vane moved first, the clang of his blacksmith's hammer still echoing from a forge as he threw himself into the street. He caught the bridle with a practiced grip, the heat of the horse's frantic breath blasting against his cheek. A crimson-sealed envelope was pinned beneath a saddle flap, edges smudged with trail dust. Sheriff Lyle Crane strode forward, long coat flaring in the rising wind, boots striking sparks from the stones. His voice carried the weight of command. Name on it. Elias pulled the envelope free. His calloused fingers shook as he turned it over, for the looping hand was one he knew as well as his own. Clara Finch, the schoolteacher who had vanished with the dawn. The woman whose smile had kindled a quiet fire in him for 2 long years. His throat tightened until it hurt to breathe. Crane's shadow fell across the letter. Read it. The wax cracked like a gunshot when Elias broke the seal. Inside lay a single scrap of paper, Clara's delicate script running like wind-shaped grass across the page. 4 words only. They know our secret. The street seemed to tilt beneath him. A gust swept down from the mesa, rattling the shutters of the dry goods store, sending dust spiraling like smoke from an unseen fire. Somewhere a dog barked and then fell silent, as though the night itself held its breath. Crane's jaw hardened. Where's Clara, Vane? I don't know. Elias forced the words past lips gone numb. But someone sure does. The sheriff's eyes tracked past the roofs of Red Butte toward the black silhouette of Blood Mesa. The sky above it burned with the last embers of sunset, a ragged wound fading into night. Far across the darkening plain, a single lantern glimmered high against the rock face, unmoving, too steady for a campfire. It flickered like a watchful eye. Elias felt the weight of the letter in his palm, as if those 4 words carried the pull of 1,000 secrets. He thought of every careful glance he and Clara had shared, every word left unspoken while the town whispered of their friendship. He heard her laugh in memory, low and defiant. What had they uncovered that could bring this? The sheriff turned sharply, spurs ringing. Saddle up. We ride. Elias hesitated, the image of Clara's face crowding his mind. He had seen her that very morning beneath the cottonwoods, light dancing through her hair as she spoke of a new shipment of books for the school. There had been something restless in her eyes, a flicker of fear she had tried to hide. He cursed himself for not asking more. The mare snorted and pawed at the ground, nostrils flaring. She smelled of sweat and distant smoke. Elias pressed his forehead to the animal's neck for a heartbeat, feeling the tremor of its racing heart. What did you see out there, girl? He whispered. Behind him the town gathered in uneasy silence. Lanterns bobbed like will-o'-the-wisps as neighbors peered from doorways. Red Butte was no stranger to danger, but this was different, quieter, more personal. The kind of threat that slid beneath doors and into dreams. Crane swung into his saddle, eyes never leaving the mesa. You coming, blacksmith? Elias tucked the letter into his coat and mounted his own gelding, the leather creaking in the hush. If they touched her, he said, voice low as a promise, I'll find them. The sheriff gave a curt nod. Then keep close. They rode out under a sky bruised purple and gold, the town shrinking behind them until its lanterns were no more than trembling stars. The prairie stretched ahead, endless and silent but for the whisper of dry grass and the distant cry of a night hawk. Each hoofbeat seemed to hammer those 4 words deeper into Elias's chest. They know our secret. Wind carried the scent of rain and iron. Far to the west, lightning stitched the horizon with pale fire. Elias's mind churned. What secret could Clara mean? Their quiet affection, hidden only from gossiping tongues, was no crime worth this. She must have found something dangerous enough to send her horse fleeing home alone. The trail narrowed as they reached the foot of Blood Mesa, the red cliffs rising like the walls of some ancient fortress. The lone lantern still burned high above, steady and cold. Crane reined in, scanning the jagged ridges. Too still, he murmured. No camp ever holds that quiet. Elias listened. No cicadas. No night whined through the pines. Only the sound of their horses shifting uneasily. The silence felt alive, like the breath before a strike. He thought of Clara again, her fearless way of facing the world, her stubborn belief that even this rough land could be tamed by learning and grace. He imagined her bound somewhere in that darkness, eyes bright with defiance, and rage rose sharp as iron in his blood. Crane's hand hovered near his revolver. "Stay sharp." Elias nodded, his own cold heavy at his side. The letter's paper rasped against his chest with every heartbeat. The lantern above seemed closer now, a solitary star against the cliff. He fixed his eyes on it, willing it to lead him to her. Then the night shattered. A single rifle crack split the air, echoing off the canyon walls like the roar of a waking beast. The horses reared, nostrils flaring. Sparks danced from stone where the bullet struck, inches from Crane's boot. Elias wheeled his horse, searching the ridges, heart pounding with sudden fury and fear. The sound rolled away into the dark, leaving only the smell of gunpowder and the racing thunder of his pulse. Somewhere beyond the black rocks, unseen eyes watched them. The lantern above swayed once, a slow, deliberate motion, as if someone had given it a push. Elias tightened his grip on the reins, the weight of the colt steadying him. "Clara," he whispered into the wind, the name both prayer and vow. The echo of the rifle shot lingered, a cold promise carried across the canyon. The harvest moon climbed over the plains like a copper shield, throwing long shadows across the desert floor as the three riders pressed toward the black mass of Blood Mesa. Sheriff Crane led with a silent resolve, his coat snapping in the restless wind. Elias followed close, the buckskin mare's ears flicking with unease, while young Jonah Finch, barely 20 and burning with a mix of fear and fury, rode at their flank. The mesa rose higher with every mile, a dark altar against the glittering scatter of stars, and each hoofbeat echoed like a drum of omen. Dust lifted in thin clouds beneath their horses, carrying the dry scent of sage and stone. Elias could taste the grit on his tongue, could feel the thrum of danger in his chest. Clara's letter lay heavy in his coat pocket, each jolt of the saddle pressing the words deeper into his thoughts. "They know our secret." The phrase pulsed like a living thing, binding him to the trail as surely as the reins in his hands. Halfway up the winding path, the moonlight caught a pale scrap fluttering on a mesquite thorn. Elias reined in, heart hammering, and reached out. It was a fragment of Clara's shawl, the faded blue unmistakable even in the silver light. The fabric was torn but still warm from the night air, as if only recently left behind. Beneath it, the dust held the imprint of a boot, small, narrow, and delicate. Not Clara's. Jonah dismounted in a single angry motion, crouching to study the track. "That's a woman's shoe," he muttered, voice tight. He spat into the dirt, the sound sharp in the silence. Someone else was here. Elias scanned the shadows. The canyon walls loomed like the ribs of a giant, their jagged edges slicing the moonlight. The hair on his neck bristled with a warning he couldn't name. Then, from the darkness, a voice floated across the rocks, low, almost a whisper, yet clear enough to chill the blood. "Turn back, blacksmith. Secrets buried stay buried." The words seemed to come from everywhere at once, carried on the night wind. Jonah spun, pistol drawn. Crane's hand rested on the butt of his revolver, eyes narrowing. Above them a silhouette emerged on the ridge, a lone raider etched in silver moonlight. The figure sat motionless, rifle resting easy across the saddle. For a heartbeat the world held still. Then a sudden spark flashed at the barrel's tip. The crack of the shot split the night. A bullet screamed against the rock, shattering a fragment of stone inches from Elias's boot. The horses reared, snorting clouds of white breath. Another shot followed, ricocheting off the trail in a shower of sparks. "Down!" Crane barked, sliding from his saddle and pulling the reins low. The three men pressed close to the cliff wall as dust rained around them. "They don't want witnesses," the sheriff hissed, voice hard as flint. Elias's jaw clenched, anger slicing through the fear. "They'll have me," he growled, the words more vow than boast. A third flash lit the ridge, but this time no bullet followed. When Elias looked up, the rider was gone, the silhouette dissolving into the silver haze of moonlight as if it had never been there. Only the faint echo of hoofbeats remained, fading into the labyrinth of crimson cliffs. Crane straightened, scanning the ridgeline. Whoever it was, they're leading us somewhere. Jonah's eyes blazed. "Then let's follow." The sheriff gave a single nod. "But careful. This mesa swallows men whole." They mounted again, guiding their horses into the narrow cut where the hoofprints led. The canyon closed around them like a throat, walls rising high and steep, the sky above reduced to a ragged slice of stars. Every sound seemed magnified, the scrape of iron shoes on stone, the creak of leather, the distant cry of a nighthawk. Elias felt the press of the letter against his chest and thought of Clara's steady gaze, the way she never flinched from the truth. He pictured her somewhere beyond these twisting passages, caught in the dark with strangers whose purpose he could not name. Fear coiled tighter in his gut, but with it came a fierce resolve. The trail wound deeper, the moonlight fading until only shadows remained. Strange rock formations loomed from the gloom like watchful spirits, their shapes distorted by the flicker of Crane's lantern. Jonah rode ahead, shoulders tense, his youthful bravado straining against the weight of dread. A sudden gust swept the canyon, carrying with it a faint scent of smoke and something sweeter, lavender, Clara's scent. Elias's heart lurched. He reined in, raising a hand for silence. The others halted, the canyon holding its breath. Then it came, a voice, soft and wavering, carried by the wind. Elias. It was Clara. The sound threaded through the darkness, fragile and desperate, yet unmistakable. Elias's chest tightened until he could hardly draw air. Clara, he called, the name echoing off the walls. Help, please, the voice answered, faint and pleading. Jonah surged forward, but Crane grabbed his reins. Wait, could be a trap. She's there, Elias said, every muscle trembling with the urge to run. The voice floated again, softer now, as if carried from a great distance. Elias, hurry. Then, as abruptly as it began, the sound cut off. The canyon fell silent, the echo swallowed by the night. No cry followed, no rustle of movement, only the steady, suffocating hush of stone. Elias gripped the reins until his knuckles whitened, the ache in his chest sharper than any wound. Clara had been there. He knew it with a certainty deeper than reason. But whoever had brought her voice to him had stolen it away just as fast, leaving only the taste of fear and the cold certainty that they were not alone. Crane lowered his lantern, the light painting hard lines across his face. They're playing with us, he said quietly. And they know every turn of this place. Jonah's voice cracked with rage. Then we make them show themselves. Elias looked into the darkness where Clara's voice had vanished. The shadows seemed to shift, shapes forming and dissolving like smoke. Somewhere ahead lay the truth she had tried to warn him of, and the danger that guarded it. He touched the letter in his pocket, the paper damp with sweat, and felt the weight of his promise settle like iron across his shoulders. Without another word, he nudged his horse forward into the deepening dark, the echo of Clara's plea ringing in his heart. The cavern mouth gaped like a wound in the red cliffs, swallowing their lantern light as Elias led the way inside. The air turned damp and metallic, every breath tasting of old salt and hidden time. Drops fell from the ceiling with the patience of centuries, each one striking stone like the tick of a slow, relentless clock. Shadows stretched and twisted with every flicker of the flame, and the path narrowed until the walls pressed cold against their shoulders. A faint glimmer caught Elias's eye. He stooped and pulled a scrap of paper from a cleft between the rocks. The lantern's glow revealed hurried strokes of a familiar hand, Clara's, each letter trembling across the page. Asterisk Elias, forgive me. The mine is not empty, asterisk. His heart pounded as he read it aloud, the words tasting of warning and regret. Beyond the note a tunnel yawned, timbered walls sagging under their own age, beams dark with moisture and groaning as if burdened by secrets. The three men exchanged a glance. Sheriff Crane raised the lantern higher, its flame throwing restless patterns on the damp planks. Looks like someone's been working a ghost shaft, he murmured, voice tight. They stepped forward, boots crunching over salt crystals that glittered like frost. The smell of oil and rust grew stronger. When the tunnel widened into a low chamber, the lantern revealed rows of crates stacked like silent sentinels. Their stenciled markings emerged from the dust, a thorn-wrapped rail spike. Elias felt a breath catch in his throat. Crane swore softly. Blackthorn Railroad. That line died with the war. Jonah brushed dirt from one of the lids. Not as dead as folks think. His knife pried at the boards until they split with a dry crack. Inside, straw cushioned the gleam of polished rifles, brass fittings catching the light like captured lightning. Beneath the weapons lay heavy sacks of gold coins and brittle Union Army maps inked with faded red routes. Smuggler's treasure, Elias said, the words barely more than a whisper. He imagined Clara stumbling on this hoard, her stubborn courage driving her deeper when any sensible soul would have turned back. The thought of her alone among thieves tightened his chest. A sudden shift of air brushed the back of his neck. He spun, lantern flaring. The cave behind them seemed to deepen, the darkness thick and alive. Then came a voice, low and cutting, as cold as the drip of the stalactites. Put the lantern down, or die in the dark. The flame wavered as 5 figures stepped from the shadows, each half-masked with bandanas, revolvers steady in their hands. Salt dust clung to their coats, and their eyes burned like coals beneath the brims of their hats. They moved without hurry, silent as predators certain of the kill. The tallest advanced a pace, the scar along his jaw pale against the lantern glow. You found what wasn't yours. His sneer curled the words into a promise of violence. Crane shifted his weight, his own revolver still low but ready. We're looking for a woman, he said, tone iron-flat. You've seen her. The leader's gaze slid to the scrap of paper in Elias's hand, then back to his face. Maybe I have. Maybe she learned more than she should. The pistol in his fist tilted slightly, an unspoken threat. Jonah's young voice snapped through the tension. Where is my sister? His revolver rose a fraction, knuckles white. The outlaw's grin deepened. Careful, boy. Salt caves make good graves. Quick to fill, slow to find. Elias tightened his grip on the lantern, every muscle coiled. He could hear his own heartbeat, fast and fierce, echoing with the slow drip of water. He pictured Clara's fearless eyes, imagined her somewhere beyond these walls, and felt anger burn hotter than fear. The leader's voice softened, dangerous as a rattler's hiss. I said put it down. No one moved. The silence stretched, broken only by the soft groan of timber above their heads. Then a sound cut through the standoff, a cry, faint but unmistakable, trembling with desperation. Elias! Clara's voice. Every head turned toward the rear shaft. A heartbeat later came the metallic snap of a hammer pulled back, sharp and final, the sound of a pistol cocked in the dark beyond. The deeper chamber smelled of gun oil and old salt, a bitter mix that clung to the tongue. Lantern light flared across splintered beams and the iron track of an abandoned ore cart. Clara stood beside it, wrist bound with coarse rope, her dress streaked with dust and blood-dark stains of sweat. When her eyes met Elias's, they burned with a fierce, desperate warning. Elias, don't! Her voice cracked, carrying over the hiss of dripping water. A man stepped from behind the cart, tall and broad, a jagged scar running from his temple to his jaw like a lightning bolt etched in flesh. Bishop Kane. His presence filled the shaft like a storm cloud. He pressed the barrel of a revolver beneath Clara's chin, the metal gleaming in the lantern's glow. She kept our secret till now, Kane said, his grin as sharp as the scar. But you came. Sheriff Crane moved in slow, deliberate steps, Colt raised but steady, eyes locked on the outlaw. Release her. Kane's grin widened. This is bigger than her. Bigger than any of you. Elias stepped forward, every heartbeat loud in his ears. Then let me trade my life for hers. The cavern seemed to inhale. Kane tilted his head, amusement flickering. Trade, is it? Clara shook her head violently, hair falling in tangled waves across her face. No. Elias, tell him the truth. Kane's brow furrowed. Truth. Her words poured out like gunfire. I loved him. I loved Elias before you paid me to teach your children, before the town's eyes. The letter wasn't confession, it was warning. Kane's sneer faltered. You what? I warned him, she spat. Because your men planned to turn on you. They already have. A muscle jumped in Kane's jaw. For the first time the certainty in his stance wavered, a flicker of doubt crossing his scarred features. He looked past her to the shadows where his men waited, their eyes shifting, hands twitching at their weapons. Elias felt the tension ripple through the room like the pull of a coming quake. The lantern flame guttered, throwing wild shapes across the salt-scored walls. He sensed the fragile thread holding them all together, fraying with every breath. Kane's voice dropped to a growl. You think I fear mutiny? Clara met his gaze without flinching. You should. A sudden hiss broke the standoff, faint at first, then growing to a sharp crackle. Somewhere near the far wall, oil-soaked timber ignited with a flash of blue light. One of the lanterns had tipped, spilling fire onto the powder crates stacked like silent bombs. The roar came a heartbeat later, an eruption of flame and sound that shook the shaft to its bones. Heat slammed against them, searing and immediate. Sparks burst through the air like swarms of furious wasps. The timbered ceiling groaned, a deep, splintering moan as stones rained from above. Jonah lunged toward Clara, but a cascade of rock forced him back. Crane fired once into the air, a futile command for order lost in the chaos. Kane stumbled, caught between the fire at his back and the treachery in his men's eyes. Elias threw himself toward Clara, the world around them turning to smoke and crimson light, the roar of the blaze rising like a living thing that would not be denied.